So let's get into this, because lots of businesses, we know the Federation of Small Businesses have warned that more than 250,000 firms are at risk of going bust this year. In December, a survey by the CBI found a third of businesses only had cash reserves to last another 3 months. This is the kind of area. Retail, for example, early in January, a report from the Centre for Retail Research said that 2020 was the worst for high street job losses in more than 25 years. Nearly 180,000 retail jobs were lost last year. That's up almost a quarter from 2019. And hospitality, which is where it really goes into some devastating territory. They're talking about 640,000 job losses across the sector during the year, despite government support, and even noise of 3.2 million eventually. Is this survivable? If it's your job or your business we're talking about it, have you hit the tipping point, or can you get beyond it? Let's speak with James Daunt, who's the CEO of Waterstones, and boy, do I miss sitting in one of those stores having a crafty read and a coffee. James, afternoon to you, sir.
Afternoon.
I mean, you can't really overstate how difficult it is. Just give us an overview, if you would, from your own perspective, because I'm assuming Waterstones shops are well and truly bolted at the moment.
They are well and truly bolted, as are independent bookshops. And we're lucky as a big business to have a very good online operation. So Waterstones.com is still running, and that sort of keeps the bills under control. But it's not easy, and if the government support measures expire as they are intended to expire, with rates coming back in April and moratorium with landlords, and the furlough scheme obviously sort of coming towards its end, then that would pose, I think, sort of almost existential difficulty for most retailers.
Yeah, and I would imagine with Waterstones, you have some lovely, almost boutique kind of shops, but you also have some massive stores in all major cities in this country. I'd imagine rent on those places doesn't come cheap.
It certainly doesn't. No, I think we need to see the government, I think, also recognise that there are some big winners in the retail sector as this has gone on. If you have been deemed to be essential, and there's been a real ragbag of people are deemed to be essential. In our case, WH Smith is a major high street competitor of ours, and they're open, so they're doing great.
Yeah.
And obviously the supermarkets and the rest. So what I think they need to do is say, well, it's a relatively small part of the retail sector, the specialists, in particular independents who are being closed, and we better support them.
What is the argument, if you were to say to a minister now, James, look, we think we should be open as well? Of course, the answer that will come back from them is that, well, that's not safe to do so because you'll have people mingling in large numbers in your stores. What's the answer to that?
I think it's perfectly reasonable that they make their public health determinations, and there'll always be a dividing line in which you fall one side of it, you feel slightly aggrieved, but they have to make those decisions, and I don't quarrel with that, essentially. I do quarrel that they, if they don't make it, provide the support that's necessary. Yeah. And I think also that some of the real iniquities that exist, long-standing iniquities, particularly around business rates, in which high street shops have to pay this additional tax, which online retailers do not, need to be addressed. For a big retailer like Waterstones, that would probably be, even Stevens. Putting an online sales tax will pay it. We'll pay the government the money there rather than through rates. But he would keep our shops open and keep employment.
Yeah, the business rates discussion was there before all of this, of course, as to its curious place in our world, and I guess that the whole COVID thing has given that a new resonance in that respect. In terms of going forward, what does the picture look like for Waterstones? It's how long can you carry on like this? What does it mean for jobs and the survival of some of your stores?
To be honest, Waterstones is fine because we're large and we've got the online operation, and we have a strong balance sheet, and we're a big business. What I really worry about, though, is that we exist on high streets where our neighbours and the communities in which we fit is really important. And if we reopen, as we surely will, but we reopen without, as it were, the candlestick maker next door and the flower shop and the this and that, that's where it'll really hurt.
Of course,
and I sort of passionately think that the high street as a whole has to be supported, and it's the independents who are really
That's spot on. It all feeds into the kind of the bigger jigsaw puzzle, as it were. James, thank you. Lots of luck with everything. James Daunt, who's the CEO of Waterstones, the commander-in-chief of all things book-based on the high street in this country. Let's speak with Helen Swig, who's the owner of Excel Hairdressing in St Austell in Cornwall. How are you doing, Helen?
Hi, I'm fine. Sorry. Yeah. I'm fine, thank you.
That's all right. Yes, the questions get easier after this, I promise you. So listen. I mean, obviously, as a hairdresser, you're now closed. You had a little point
again.
where you well, it's the again thing, isn't it? Because you were closed, then open, then closed, then open, and I think in Cornwall, of course, you had Tier 1 status, didn't you, at some point? So you were even open when everybody else was closed. But now, of course, we're all back in the same boat.
Well, we went from Tier 1 to Tier 2. And then 3 in a really short space of time. So that was an eye opener. And I don't know. We came back to work just after Christmas, opened for 2.5 days, and then we were locked down again.
Yeah.
And it is really difficult. You know, when you start seeing your bank balance go down, and I mean, I've got 3 girls that work for me, and they're all furloughed at the moment. But that is until April. And I think the worrying thing is now that we don't know when we are going to be open again. There is no sign of it, you know.
Yeah. I mean, in terms of the staff can be furloughed, it's your place. You've still got bills to pay, I would assume. Are those rental holidays or business rate holidays? Where do they sit in your local authority?
Well, we've, like I said, we've had the grant. We've had a 3rd grant now. But that will just tide me over. I mean, the last thing I want to do is start saying to any of my staff, you know, I'm going to have to cut hours when we do go back and that sort of thing. So at the minute, it's okay, but only for a short space of time. Yeah,
I mean, have you set yourself a kind of date, Helen, that you can not go beyond without this becoming kind of irreversible?
I think end of February, March time is a crucial time. Once it hits March, I'm going to have to seriously start thinking about, I don't know,
where you go, what you do.
Where I'm going to go from here. Yeah, absolutely. It is worrying. And you know, you chatting to CEO from Waterstones, I mean, that must be a total nightmare. I mean, that's like a big concern, you know.
Yeah. Well, as he said, that big stores work hand in hand with smaller ones as well, don't they? Because, you know, when you go to the high street, you want to see a mixture of these things. And if there's no temptation to get you in to, you know, if you've got a hairdresser's that's next to another store, you might visit the other store while you're at the head. It's an obvious thing. But so none of this is falling into place right now. And I guess, you know, you can only cut so much of your own family's hair, can't you, really, Helen?
Yeah. And at the minute, you can't really do anybody's. So there you go.
I
know it is difficult. I don't know.
And is this? I mean, when you talk to, I don't know if is there a sisterhood of the scissors that exists in Cornwall? Do you all kind of know each other? Are you in touch, or is it just fierce rivalry?
No, not at all. Well, I'm not. To be honest, in the street that I'm in, there's 3 salons in a small street. So and we're fine. We're all fine.
But you're all obviously in exactly the same position, aren't you?
Yeah, absolutely. There's a couple of people that I am really good friends with that they work for themselves now. But it's the not knowing when we're going to be back. Yeah. So.
And that's very much the not knowing, the lack of confidence is of course the enemy of success and the enemy of business.
Yeah, and also when we do go back, it's like if the high streets are suffering and there's a lot of places that are closed, then we need footfall, don't we?
Of course you do.
We need those people walking past the door and coming in.
You absolutely do. Listen, Helen, great to speak with you. Thank you. We wish you loads of luck, and let's hope that corner is turned. Helen Swig, who's the owner of Excel Hairdressing in St Austell in Cornwall. I think that story clearly replicates in that respect. It's interesting to get the big kind of business empire in Waterstones and the smaller businesswoman in Helen's story there as well, because essentially it is the same story. And of course, livelihoods and jobs are all dependent on this as well. 0344 499 1000. We'll have more of your calls as well in a few moments. How is this for you? I mean, I'm interested as to whether there is the tipping point that everybody says I can survive for that long. For you, how long is that tipping point? Have you now reached the tipping point, the point of no return? And just looking at that collection of headlines I brought you at the beginning, it's not over cynical to look at that and think, is this story really over? At the moment, I'm looking at these stories and thinking, this fines of £800, £500, have you? More cases here, closing down of this. China in reverse. Japan having a terrible time. California, 30,000 deaths. This thing don't look like it's over anytime soon to me, and I don't want to overinflate anything here. But when I hear government ministers say, oh, by Easter, the schools should be open, I'm thinking this is grade A balderdash, Gavin. First, James Thomas is the owner of Little Ships in Ramsgate. James, good to speak with you again. How are you, sir?
Hello, Ian. Good afternoon. Sunny Ramsgate today.
Still in Ramsgate, but sitting in you have, unfortunately, a restaurant that is closed.
Yes, we have. Although we're open for takeaway and at the moment collection, but it's been closed since the lockdown, yes.
What does that, I mean, the takeaway kind of collect thing, I mean, obviously that's not going to make you a livelihood for the rest of time. Does it keep the wolf away from the door? Does it do anything?
It does. Yes, it does things. We would never have taken on the lease if the takeaway and delivery was our only market. Yeah. So it's small gruel, but we've learned to adapt. I think about a small restaurant in a sort of good locations that you can quickly adapt. Well, you have to adapt.
Sure, of course you do. Of course you do. And how is it? I mean, you never really got back up and running, of course, because in Kent,
I forget these different lockdowns. They're talking on the press, first lockdown, second lockdown, third lockdown. And it's almost, you have to build a whole diary, a whole sort of...
Yes, I was trying to remember which lockdown we last spoke during. But of course,
we spoke one before Christmas. And if you remember, I said about we should move Christmas.
That's right, you did, yes. Yeah, why not? That was the plan that actually made most sense throughout the whole show. Let's just move Christmas.
Yeah, so we're now looking, I understand that in the news today that it could be May. And so I think what government needs, we need a sort of a creeping barrage of support.
Yeah.
That, each month gets further and further away. We know that some sort of support, it creeps along with us. We know it's never going to be the total amount we're going to need, but anything that can come our way, keeps things alive.
What is it mostly, James? What's the one thing that would be most helpful, either from government or local authority? What would that be?
Well, long term, we think we need a Minister of Hospitality. There's a big push for a seat at the table to try. And I think there was a debate in Parliament the other day because we need a minister. It's 3 million people employed.
Yeah.
It's the third biggest industry, I think, in the country. And we need someone at cabinet level who can understand the business. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a long-term challenge. Immediate things are all those normal things like VAT, business rates, grants that get you through until when we know we can open. It's the planning which is difficult.
Yeah.
It's a difficult one to plan. But if the government said, okay, May is going to be a time, we're going to work towards May for the moment, and then we can plan a sort of 4 or 5 month cash flow to get us there. It's the unknown which is difficult.
Yeah, I mean, we were speaking in the last section to a hairdresser, and she was saying exactly that it's the not knowing that is almost as bad as anything else.
Yeah, that's a difficulty. Although we've got used to it. It's rather like a sort of a toothache that doesn't go away. You're waiting for the dentist to open. You don't know where you can get in, and the toothache it's awful to start with, and then you sort of get used to it. But you do want to get it out and finished, and it's important to see some light at the end of the tunnel. I think government's a very difficult position all around the world. I think it's very, very difficult.
Yeah.
We just need lifelines to get us past that go, like that monopoly to land on go.
Sure.
So we we can throw the dice and off we go around the board again. So
indeed. Well, we will speak again, James. I hope when we do that we are out of lockdown. It'd be nice to have a conversation when you're back up and running, and behind you we see a flurry of table service going on and lovely dishes being passed from your staff to your customers. James, thank you. James Thomas is the owner of Little Ships in Ramsgate. They're based in Kent. And this is Ty Barry, who's the manager of the Greenwich Pensioner Pub. How are you doing, Ty?
Hello, Ian. How are you going?
All right, yeah. I mean, similarly, I think we possibly even spoke the same day that we spoke to James last time. And clearly, I mean, you've not really been open since then. I mean, not in any meaningful way.
No, exactly. There was a small window of opportunity at the beginning of December that was closed very quickly, wasn't there?
Yeah.
And ever since, it's kind of bizarre, isn't it? As it is for the whole country.
How how many staff did you have working with you, Ty?
I had 5.
Mm-hmm.
So not a big place. And those guys are all out seeking other employment now, essentially.
Yeah. And of course, but it's on your shoulders. So what does it mean for you personally?
Yeah, I know it doesn't feel good. After the first lockdown, I had started an online craft beer business. Which I thought, okay, let's keep hold of this because we don't know what's going to go on. And it was a good idea to keep hold of it because sure enough, there was more restrictions, more lockdowns as we are now. And my hope was that I could transfer my staff over to working with me on this. But unfortunately, due to the nature of it, it just doesn't require as many people and doesn't bring in the sort of money that would be able to hire as many people.
Yeah.
So...
Are you able to? Does it offset some of your costs? However, having this sort of bolt-on business working while the other one isn't.
Yeah, that's the main game, really, isn't it? Just to make sure that the unavoidable costs still do get dealt with to a certain extent. I mean, there's a lot of competition when you're selling online. The great thing that I've always loved about a public house is it caters towards the community. Restaurants, bars, they cater towards their direct community. Of
course.
And, and you have your local customers, and that's the sort of business that I grew up in.
Yeah.
So having to start a new business, which is online, websites, it's not natural for me to do so. It's just something that I sort of have to do. Plus, there's a heck of a lot of competition because you're taking on the whole world,
Yeah. I imagine in your heart you're an optimist. I think all business people have to be to a certain degree, but also a realist. Yeah. What's your thinking? We just spoke to James a second ago. He's thinking maybe May time there could be sort of an opening up of things, and it might start to get back to a semblance of normality. But you look at some of the headlines and you think, well, is that really going to be the case? All the while we've got costs and all manner of horrendous headlines going out there. What's your own take on when things might at least begin to go back to a semblance of normality?
Well, I've sort of given up trying to guess, as I'm sure a lot of people have. I was at the beginning of January, I thought, let's look at 3 months into the future.
Yep.
They're rolling out this vaccine. They're positive. The government are very positive about the result. The results of it. So, the beginning of April. Let's fingers crossed that we can, bring it back to some sort of normality. Of course, there's going to be social distancing and mask wearing and this sort of thing for who knows,
So you're hoping you've got your mind in the sort of April territory.
Yeah, well, I did, but as I say, I've given up trying now. I've given up trying to work that out.
Yeah, I get that.
I'm just trying to focus on my business, A Good Drop, which is the online business, and hope, my aim is to utilize the premises that I've got, the connections that I've got, to keep this thing taking me over until I can open my pub back to.
Yeah. Back to normality. And on that point, I think we slightly lost your line there, but Ty, thank you. Ty Barry is the manager of the Greenwich Pensioner pub in southeast London.